fasting and prayer. Well, this month of January, we've been talking about life after this. Life after what? Life after divorce, after the pandemic, after seasons of testing. How do you pick up the pieces and move on? I was reading a scripture today and I wanted to read it to you. In Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 20 in the Message Bible, it says, God can do anything, far more than you could imagine, guess, or request in your wilderness and in your dreams, not by pushing you around, but by working within you by his Spirit and gently nudging you into the things he has for you. Then he says in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 20 that there's no life, no assumption that you paid careful attention to him. You observed him. Since then, we do not have the ignorance, the old way of life. He has now wanted us to move forward through new beginnings, getting rid of all of the old things and entirely starting in a new way. God wants us to have a new beginning, and it's never too late to have a new beginning. And tonight we're going to have Marquita Batchelor. Elder Marquita Batchelor is here with us. I'm going to summarize a little bit about what we discussed this month, and then we're going to talk to her about what God is doing in her life. But she dropped a nugget on us tonight that I thought is so relevant to what we're talking about. In Job chapter 42 and verse 16, she said that after this, Job lived. And this is what I want you to understand. I want you after this fasting to live, after this pandemic to live, not to be worried about dying prematurely. You got to be able to say to yourself, even if COVID stopped by, I'm going to survive that. You have to be able to literally speak to yourself and to your life, not to live in fear, not be afraid to go out. No, that's not going to be healthy living for you in 2021. It's going to be a level of trust for God. So we started talking about life after this and the different effects and how it was affecting everyone. We even began to talk about everybody was in the same boat. In 2020, we're all in the same boat. But here was the difference. We were all in different size boats. Some people battled the pandemic through poverty. Some of the rich and famous, they went to their beach homes and they hung out there. And they stayed there. Some of the middle class stayed at home. And so everybody handled it all in a different level. But everybody was affected, that's for sure. It not only affected America, but it was worldwide. So now how is everybody going to pick up the pieces? Think about all the preachers that travel to speak. Think about all the singers that travel to sing. Think about how all their income just cut tremendously, instantly, without even all of the traveling evangelists, no income. There was no notice, there was nothing, it was gone. So how are they going to pick up the pieces? I want you to think about that. But then when we came into 2021, God said, I'm going to cloak you with favor. I'm going to give you dominion, power, and authority. So he was telling us, even though we hear the pandemic, we can't sit here and be afraid. You've got favor. You've got dominion. Take authority, and you have power. Speak the word. And so God was trying to encourage us not to cross into 2021 empty-handed. And so we started talking about that. You can't come in empty-handed. And then when you come into the time of 21 days of fasting and prayer, how are you leaving that? Are you coming out empty-handed? Did you just use a few pounds? Or did you come out spiritually fit, fresh ideas, revelation, enjoying your time with God, and even making some decisions to change some habits? This morning I was saying in our morning service, it's time to say I quit. What are some of the things I'm going to quit after this fast? And I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. And so we recognized that we were all in the same boat. And then last week we talked about your time, your talent, and your treasury. How much time are you giving into the things that are important? I reminded you every day to work on your vision. Every day work on a book if you're writing. Every day work on a message if you're a preacher. Because when the door opens, you want to be ready to run. So you've got to use your time wisely. Are you using your talents to bring in other streams of income? I was telling one of my staff people, I was saying, listen, you have this gifting and that gifting and that gifting. Those are streams of income. Let's put those to work because that's necessary. And then we talked about your treasury. How long are you going to say, I'm going to save, I'm going to save, I'm going to start? When will you actually stop procrastinating and start, even if it's $20? We talked about treasury. And treasury is not just money. Remember, we talked about it's not just money. It's all of the things that your relationships, the good relationships, all the things that you treasure is what God wants us to look at. So those are some of the things that we covered. And we were really excited about the fact that coming out of this fast, what is God saying next? What's our next? I don't know about you. And we started on Sunday. We were talking about, listen, we are going to take some keys. We have keys now, and we're going to access some doors in 2021. We literally got keys, and we named our keys. Well, this is what we're going to access in 2021. I have 3 major projects on the table right now, and those are the keys that I'm working with. There's some little small ones, but those I can do by myself. But these 3 big ones, it's going to need some Jesus in those, because it's not like I have the money sitting there or that, but I know some parts of my life has to be a faith walk. The Bible said the just shall live by faith. And it's no use talking about faith if I'm not going to put it into action. So I have 3 projects, and they're literally faith projects. If they're going to be done this year, it's going to be all God. You know what I'm saying? So don't just limit yourself to asking God for things that you can manage by yourself. Some things, stretch yourself a little bit and stretch your faith a little bit, because God can give you $1, he can give you 1,000, or he can give you 10,000, he can give you 10 million. He's God. It's nothing short for God. So I want to make sure that you're not coming out of this fast still scratching your head thinking, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? I don't want that. I want you to come out excited, exuberant, ready to run in 21, taking each month and making bite-sized goals. I made my list for January, and I finished it, completed it before the month is even over. I made my list for February, and I'm telling you, it's going to take some Jesus to help me finish that one, and because I'm getting ready to travel, and I want to make sure I'm safe in my travel, but I know I've got to do this, so I know I'll be all right. So just making different changes and things that need to be done, but not allowing fear to hinder me. And so when I was thinking of life after this, I was thinking of somebody that I knew. We have been friends now for some years. We have been friends, oh my God, over 8-9 years. I think we traveled our first trip to England about 8-9 years ago. We all decided we, going. And I met her in a place, and she was like, Pastor, I'm just ready to go. I'm ready to go with you. And so I want you to meet her. I want you to meet Marquita, because when I thought about life after this, I remember when she gave me her book. And I read it, and I was like, wow, she went through this, and I was like, that's crazy. And so I said, okay, if there's one person I could think of, because sometimes when I say it about myself, people will be like, Pastor, they don't think I went through anything. Pastor Connie, you just arrived, you've been here, no problem. They don't have no idea how many tears I done cried, pillows I done soaked, floors I done walked. They don't think so. So I said, let me bring someone else in that maybe they'll believe her more than me, because she has gone through some things, and that is so important for you to understand that anytime you walk in the level of anointing that these women of God that I know walk in, you have been through something. So let me introduce her to you, Elder Marquita Batchelor. Let her tell us a little bit about yourself, Elder Marquita. Tell us a little about you, where you go to church, how we met.
God bless you. Thank you so much for having Apostle Connie. I'm just so excited to be here. I was thinking about when we met. So we knew each other from when I was in Pittsburgh from the Lord's Church.
Yes.
And so we knew each other then, and there was some distance. I left Pittsburgh and went to Ohio, and it was a conference we both spoke at a few years ago.
Okay.
And I said, Pastor Connie, what have you been up to? We just reconnected. And you said, oh, I'm getting ready to take 100 women to London. And I said, well, you're taking 99 because I was born. I mean, that was it. It was like I just knew right then and there. And from that point on, it was like that was the year that my mourning turned into joy. So just to tell you a little bit before that about my story, I was married, got married in 2000, and in less than 5 years, 11 days before our 5th wedding anniversary, my husband passed. So, you get married, and the expectation is you get better, richer, right?
Grow together.
Yes, you don't get sickness and worse and poor, but we went through an experience. He was diagnosed late-stage cancer, had no idea. We went through a period of financial devastation. And I tell the story, between the two of us, there were like 7 degrees.
Wow.
But we could not find a job. There was a season, and it was so quick. It was like the doors were closing. It's like, oh, you're the finalist. Oh, no, an internal candidate came in. It was like it happened back to back, and I said, okay, God said, something's happened here. So
Wow.
God shut down all the doors and literally walked through poverty. I mean, lived beneath the poverty level for a period of time.
Wow.
And then there was sickness. And it was just a season of great loss on so many levels. You know, it was just that period in that season. And it was devastating. Lost home, husband. And by the time we had met, I had been grieving for 5 years.
Wow.
My husband died in '06. And when we connected, it was like my husband died in '06, my father-in-law 7 months later, and my mother-in-law 11 months after that.
Died.
Yes. So it was a period of time of just grief back to back to back.
Wow.
And I remember crying. I said, God, how will I ever get over this when I have to keep going back and revisiting the same places?
Wow, wow, wow.
And it was like for 5 years, every year during that period of time, those last few days of my husband's life, I relived it.
Wow.
And when we connected, the trip to London came about the end of September, the beginning of October.
Yes.
And he passed October 3rd.
Wow.
And that was the year that October 3rd, literally, we were on a train to Paris. But that year, because it was something new, it was something different.
Took your mind from all of that.
It shifted everything. So now everything was new. Like, the currency. I mean, we learned so much. It was like, it just shifted everything. I didn't realize the day had even come and gone by that time.
Okay.
And that was just the beginning of it. So, and for the next, 2 or 3 years after that, I think we had a couple trips to London. We went to South Africa for a couple of years.
Yeah.
After that, but it was always during that same season.
Every fall we were traveling.
So that was the change and the turn. And I'll tell you, that was life-changing for me.
Yeah.
But that was the beginning.
But when someone sees you in this season of your life and see us in this season of our life, it will look like this is the way it's always been. This is the way, when people meet you, they just assume, that this is the way it's always been. They don't see you as somebody living below the poverty line. That's not you,
Yes.
And I tell people all the time, I remember having toast and corned beef because there was nothing else we could have. We couldn't get meats because we were paying child support in England and we was trying to take care of here. So I understand how those seasons of sequential testings take place. That's what I call them. Seasons of sequential testings. And those so much that you all understand that out there in our Facebook family, people think that when you're going through a testing that God is mad at you, God's not mad at you. It's called life. It's how you produce the anointing. It's how you grow. It's how you mature. And so, and although she went through that, knowing Marquita the way that I do, what I can say is it was necessary.
Absolutely.
Okay, I feel like all of us that go through these seasons, and I tell a lot of the younger preachers and the younger women who want to throw in their marriage and throw in the towel, I'm just like, man, just stay the course because this is called life. You are going to be tested. If you married the best man on the earth, you married the Pope, I don't care who you marry, it's going to be a test because you're living with someone you don't know. You're having to learn them. And that's not an easy job. And so when you get to that place now where you're thinking, you're planning for good or better or for worse for the rest of our life, we're thinking that this is going to be a lifetime situation. And then in 5 years, the relationship has come to a close, has come to an end. And how do you pick up the pieces? What was one of the first things that you had to do that?
So one of the things, and I was thinking of this, there was a young lady who sent me a proposal for was women in ministry or women in spirituality, and it was a Cleveland clinic, Cleveland State University. And they said, I'm sure you're going to submit a proposal so you could do a presentation there. And I'm like, I've never done anything like that before.
Okay.
And all you had to do was write 250 words to submit the proposal. And I struggled to write those words.
Wow.
So it was literally doing something different and something new, breaking a pattern.
It challenged you.
It challenged me. So I did that. That was one of the things that I did. And I did it, and they accepted it. So now, again, it was that whole thing like, well, how do you do that? So I had to go and study and figure that out. So that was a part of it.
Okay.
But it was literally, I mean, I just kept praying and kept crying out to God and just said, God, I knew he was going to help me through it. It was like, and that was the worst. I'd come through the worst of it.
Okay.
That was like the culmination of it all, was the death of my husband.
Okay.
That was the culmination involved. When you talk about people never, I rolled coins.
Yeah.
You know, I rolled coins to eat. You talk about
my goodness.
Like, rolled coins for gasoline, right? Roll. Now I do it for fun.
Yeah. But
now
then
I do it because I want to, because I enjoy it.
But that season.
I remember every time I do, I said I have to survive.
On the coins.
Absolutely.
On the coins.
Absolutely. It was and was you're talking about necessary. It was humbling.
Yes.
It was crushing. Flesh was dying.
Because you had been at such a place. You were on point. I mean, doing things in life.
Yes.
So this was like almost a crushing for you.
Total crushing. So it was as if I've always said that I was the person you came to if you needed something.
Yeah, right.
Not the person in need.
Yeah, you were in the pen. You were in the piece of need. You were the one that was always a blessing to someone. And life will do that to you. Because when God calls you to do something, I want to share this with some of you tonight. When God calls you to do something, the process, you don't get to choose. You don't get to choose the process. That's going to make the anointing in your life. That's going to let that oil flow in your life. Sometimes when people hear you preach, teach, they have no idea the cost. The one scripture that talks about the alabaster box, the breaking of that letting that oil out, in our lives to be a blessing to someone. And I think some of the things we went through wasn't even for us. Was for the people that we were going to have to minister to.
Yes.
And how many people would think after losing a husband, they can go back to the things that you have done. Let's talk a little bit about her book. I want to share a little bit about her book with you tonight. I want you to see it, Tearful, right? Tearful Surrender?
Tearful Surrender, Joyful Release.
That's her book. And I want you to see that tonight, and you can get that book. But I want to talk to you tonight about that. There's a couple of chapters in there that we want to talk about tonight. You said you're single and satisfied. Tell me, what does that mean? Tell me how you feel about that.
Well, I say there are two occasions that I had to become single and satisfied. When I was single before I married. So single and satisfied with me was to be content. I had to learn contentment. I had to learn to be content with the state that I was in.
Okay.
So, as you grow up, they were a couple-oriented society. Everybody's a couple. I mean, you just think that's you're an odd man out, or it's like something's wrong with me. Oh, you're not married yet. You're so pretty. You get all of these things. And I just had to get to a place where I literally, the word came to me, occupy until he comes. Okay. So instead of moaning and groaning and merely existing, like learn to live single.
But what about popping into up relationships in and out?
You know what? I had friends.
Okay.
But I had friends. I told the story like this one guy was from Philadelphia and he was really serious, and he was a Christian, and I was on a fast. I was on a fast, and he said, "Well, let's pray about it." And I prayed about it, and literally it was the sweetest spirit in the dream, and it said, "Let's be friends." I mean, so it was just friends.
Yeah.
That was it. And by the time my husband did come, I was like, I'm getting ready to get my PhD. I'm like, what do you want? Why are you here? It's it's like when you least expect it.
Then that's when it comes.
But it was just learning to be content in that state. Yeah. And literally, so I decided whatever I wanted to do, I was going to do it. I was not going to wait for someone to come along to travel. I wasn't going to wait for someone to make purchases. It was like whatever I wanted to do, I was going to do it. And it was a time for accomplishing. I got degrees, went to school, to night school, things of that nature. But I traveled. Yeah. I enjoyed being single. I enjoyed, we went to conferences. I mean, we just did things. Spent time on the beach. Or we played hard, prayed hard, worked hard.
There's one thing I want to ask you, though. When you say it's a new season, when did you realize the new season started? After all of the death, when could you actually say, you know what? Is it when you went to England, or before or after that you can say there's a new season? In that chapter of your book, the new season.
The new season was literally the first of it was the trip to London.
Okay.
That was the first of it. And I thought, again, we went back-to-back trips for a period of 3 or 4 years.
4 years, yeah.
And I thought that the healing was taking place, and I was like feeling good until I went to write the book. Now this is funny. In South Africa in 2013, we went to some prophetic class or something, and these women began to prophesy over me about writing books.
Yes, yes,
And I was like, okay, well, God, you take me all over. Now, I had already received several prophecies about writing a book, but I'm like, I'm not writing this. This is personal. This is painful, right? You know, in my heart, I said that. Then I get halfway around the world,
Yeah.
and they're talking about, you will write a book. And I was like, okay, that was 2013.
Wow.
In 2014, I went to a writers' conference in January, and the Lord dealt with me and said, you will write that book this year, or you will live out a spiritually insignificant life. You will die on the vine. I'm like, oh no, that's not happening.
Oh.
So there we have.
That's when the new season began to shift.
So when I wrote, Pastor Connie, I thought I was healed.
Yes.
Until I
started writing. And the tears.
I had to go back into those places and relive and sense and feel everything. The writing was so cathartic. That's when I knew that healing, that season had really begun, is after I was able to write. And you talk about this all the time. You talk about journaling and writing. Even if you have to tear it up.
Write a letter to God. Yes.
Write a letter to God. There were portions of this book that I wrote, and I wrote every emotion and every feeling. It was very transparent what's here, but some of it didn't make it.
Oh, no,
Some of it I wrote. I put in the anger, the words that I was thinking, or whatever it was, and I tore it up.
Yeah.
I said, now I can write for public consumption.
Yeah, yeah.
That was for me.
That was for you to cry over.
That was cathartic.
Yeah.
That was the healing that took place, where I could now talk about that experience and not experience that pain anymore.
Yeah. How many of you think about this tonight? Those of you that are with us, you can send us up some hearts. Let us know how many of you have gone through a season of testing where when you sat down with God, the tears, that ugly cry, where you just had to let it flow because you realized you were being healed. You really didn't even realize sometimes you were hurting that bad. You thought, because you kept saying, I'm okay, I'm okay. But then when you sat down in the presence of God and you start writing or you start talking to God, the tears, that ugly cry. One of my daughters, Ruth Ann, called it the ugly cry, where when you get ready to cry, it's just all over the place because you realizing you were in a pain that you didn't even want to touch. You didn't know how it was going to respond, so you just kind of said, I'm fine. That's how the church people, I'm good, I'm blessed and highly favored. But the pain, tell us about that. You all send us a note so we know how to pray for you, because that season is not an easy season. No. When when you're trying to figure out yourself, trying to figure out, should I be in a relationship? Am I healed enough to be in a relationship? Or should I just wait on God? Talk to me a little bit about for richer and for poorer. When you say that, was that just for your marriage, or how do you see that going forward for other couples?
For richer, for poor. So to me, it was, again, you marry everybody you want richer, but what happens when you get poor?
Poor.
What do you do then? So you still have to stay the course. You made that commitment. But I think of it. I hit a place where God said, "Lovest thou me more than these?" During that whole period of time, it's like, do you love me more than the answer? Do you love me more than the answer? And I had to get to say, yes, Lord, regardless of what happens, if this situation never changes, I'm going to love you, I'm going to serve you. So that was all part of that surrendering and breaking. It's like, okay.
And I noticed today, people don't want the poorer. Now, when you hear young people talk about marriage, they want a husband that comes with this, and this. Men want women that come with this and this. But the bottom line, just suppose the person that God sends you is a nice person, a kind person, but they don't have all the monies. They don't have everything. Are you going to throw them out because after you realize, I was just talking to someone, they weren't even married 6 months and the wedding's over, it's done. Because they realized the person had no money, they had nothing to offer, and I'm like, well, what did you bring to the table?
Right, exactly.
Exactly. And so, is it really for richer, for poorer, or is it? What did God say? Did God tell you that's your husband? Exactly. I think that's the whole thing, because you had to walk through that with the cancer with him because he was your husband.
Yes.
I walked through with my husband for over a year battling cancer, and you have to get to a place where you realize I didn't just marry for the good times.
Exactly.
And so
that's a vow.
It is.
It's a vow
It is.
you make.
Yeah.
It's not just words that you say, it's a vow. So you have to honor that vow.
How do you all feel about that in Facebook tonight and on and our channels? What do you all think about richer or for poorer? Are you going to stay in a relationship while you walk through the tests and trials? Are you going to love somebody because they're kind, they're considerate? Because we're going to be talking a lot about that next month. Next month is our relationship series. We're going to be talking to husbands and wives. We're going to be talking to singles. We're going to be talking to people that have been married and divorced. We're going to be talking about blended. All of February is dedicated to relationships. And so I want you all to hear this. Richer or for poorer? Which one? How many of you are going to stay in the marriage even though somebody loses a job? Think about it. You can marry someone and in the first year of your marriage is an accident and you have to take care of them. You know, the most important thing for me in a relationship, what did God, you know what kept my marriage? And I can only talk about myself, because God told me that was my husband.
Exactly.
That's what. So whether it's rich or poor or broke, I don't know what it is. I just know I did not get married based on an emotion.
Yes.
I loved him. I wanted to be with him, but I wanted also to know. And I took him to my sister in New York. I said, we're going to fly into New York and drive to Pittsburgh because I need somebody to talk to you that
Sure.
I'm not emotionally, all tied up in it. And one thing I could say for the 22 years now that we've been married is that every time I hit a place where I just didn't know what to do, I had to remember I had asked God. And he said, this was my husband. And I think this is what this generation needs to know. That when you were going through that, you had to know God has given you this man, and it was your job as his wife to see him through some of the, probably it was the hardest time of his life. And I bet you he wasn't nice all the time.
Of course not.
Oh, because he's hurting.
He's sick. And a lot of times a person that is sick, they'll lash out at the person that's well. They'll lash out at that person. Because first of all, they're the closest one to them.
Yes.
And then it's almost like there's a resentment because you are well.
Yes, and I'm sick.
Exactly. So no, it was not like there was there was
Yes.
kindness, but you're making every sacrifice and doing everything.
You can. But that's what
it's as unto the
That's it. You did it
as unto the Lord.
And that's what happens. When you know that God has told you this is your relationship, you have to owe it to God. I remember one time I went to God, my husband and I had an argument, and I'm just upset, and I don't wanted to talk, not saying anything. And I remember going to God and saying, God, this is not working for me. This is just not working. He said, well, tonight, why don't you see him as a sinner, need to be saved by grace? I was like, what? He said, see him as a sinner. Okay, you don't want to see him as your husband tonight? Well, see him as a sinner. Just think of him as if you went to the altar and had to minister to him. I was like, you come up with all of these, But when God puts you in a relationship, you got to work through the kinks. There's no doubt. The most important thing, if I don't say anything else tonight, is know what God has told you, if that is your spouse. Because that's what I think when I read Marquita's book, is that those were the things that held her in her season of sequential testing. Here's another one that she talked about, until death do us part. Until death. I'm not going to go through every chapter, but this one was a significant one. Until death do us part.
Yes. Parting was so difficult because it was parting on so many levels. I had an experience, I led worship at the Lord's Church for years, and in my husband's last hours, literally, I said everything I needed to say to him. I whispered in his ears and literally chronicled the good times from the time we met all the way through. And I'm like, okay, now I don't have anything else to say. Okay, Lord, what? And it was like usher him into my presence.
Wow.
Worship, like what? I knew what that meant.
Yeah.
And literally I began to worship in the hospital room. And I went to a place that I just lost sight of everything. I mean, I was out there somewhere just worshiping.
Just worshiping.
And literally I heard myself say, Michael, I release you.
Wow.
And that's when I literally came back to reality. And that stunned me. I'm like, you know how Lord speaks something to me. Like, who said? And literally, he was gone.
Wow.
That was a situation. I said, I'm telling you, but there was such a peace in that room.
How old was your husband when he passed?
My husband was 58.
Wow.
58. And, but there was such a peace. Literally, I hit a point, you're talking about a peace. it's one thing to know the word, to hear it,
Yeah.
preached, but literally when it becomes real.
Yeah.
It said the Bible talks about a peace that surpasses all understanding. There was such a peace that was over me, literally. I felt peace like I had never experienced it before. I was consoling the nurses. And I walked in that peace for, literally, I still like, no, you can't have that peace. That peace you can't, I don't let anyone, no, you can't have that peace. But that literally carried me through. That was an experience I will never forget. And then, like I said, the death to us part, it was the parting of my husband, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law. You know what I mean? So it was like a season of till death do us part. But I was so blessed because I was able to spend last hours with my mother-in-law. I sang to her and worshiped with her. And she passed the next morning. I mean, it was like, so God allowed.
What span? Was that a year or two?
7 months after my husband. So he died in 2006. My mother-in-law, my father-in-law 7 months later in 2007. My mother-in-law in 2008, 11 months after that. So it was just back to back. And my heart was just, I was just in a broken, that's what said brokenness.
Every time you tried to recover, there was something else coming.
Utter brokenness. So I had to go back and revisit. He's from Detroit. I had to go back to those same places and revisit the same pain over, just like putting salt in an open wound. Over and over and over again.
Wow.
So it took, that's why I tell, no one can tell you how long to grieve.
No.
No one can tell you, like, oh, you should be over it by now. I was like, it takes what it takes.
Yeah. It's not something easy. You've got to do it at your pace.
You do. You
Wow.
do. But again, that's what said, God gave me, she said, I'll give you beauty for ashes. I'll give you beauty for ashes. And joy comes in the morning and weeping, so I just clung. But there's a morning coming. There's a morning. And one I woke up out of, God deals with me in dreams. And I woke up and he dealt with me with songs he said he gives you songs through the night. I had songs that carried me through the night. I'd wake up and there'd be a song ringing in my spirit. I'm like, okay, Lord, thank you, Lord. Get me through this today. But one of them was Anita Baker's song. It said, in the morning, it'll be all over in the morning. And I heard that song ringing. I'm like, okay. I was excited. So I knew what was coming through the end of that whole season. But it was a long season. It seemed like it was forever. But I'm telling you, but I believe, I know beyond shadow of a doubt, I will never walk that way again. Because when you pass the test, you don't have to retake them. You don't have to retake them.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Never be broke another day
in my life.
Never.
Yes, yes.
Never.
Because you have set yourself up.
I passed the broke test.
Yes. Never going back to that again.
Never.
I think once you learn the lesson, I tell that to Dr. Galloway, I say that to her. Once I came through that, I don't ever. And sometimes I think the team and the prayer line family think, Pastor Connie's always talking about emergency room, because I don't ever want to see anybody there, because I know what it feels like. I know the pain of not having. I know the pain of, somebody walk up to you and say, can you get a ticket? It's $20. And you're like, see me on payday. You mean I need to wait till payday to give you? Yeah.
Yes.
That was the season I was in at that time, And so when you get out of that and you don't have to, I say to God, I'll never. And I get so panicky that if my finance started getting a certain place, I'm like, oh no, everything shut down. Ain't nothing happening, because I'm never going down that place again. Because it's so critical for us to do that. I want to talk to you about when the storm is over. There's a chapter in your book that talks about the storm is over. And like we were saying, Kathy and I were talking about the storm of 2020. Mm-hmm. Everybody was in a storm. Mm-hmm. Everybody was. I looked at television and I saw a couple of the singers at their beach homes. And I said, wow, they get to ride the storm out at their beach home. I saw some people in line for food. I said, my goodness, this storm is affecting. And then I thought about myself. I'm in a brand new home, and God has done this for me. I said, wow. So I really started thinking. So some were in poverty, some were middle class, some were rich, but then there was some that knew God. Mm-hmm. And it didn't matter what class you were in, but you knew God. It didn't matter where I was riding the storm out in, but I knew God. Yes. When I read that chapter regarding your storm, I really believe for you is because of your relationship with God. That kept you in all of this. How did you ride this storm out now? This is another storm in your life.
I would have lost my mind. Literally, the stress was so great and the pressure was so intense. you almost could not put a complete sentence together. I'd start with the first word of the sentence and couldn't get to what was I, because of the stress. I'm telling you, I laid hands on my head and said, God, you promised. Thought I was going to lose my mind, literally. So it was the word of God that sustained me. God, you promised to keep me in perfect peace.
Yes.
If I kept my mind stayed on you. And literally, it was the word of God that sustained me. He gave me songs. Like I said, he gave me songs in the night. One of the songs was the Agnes Day. And that song was literally pure worship. He shifted me from, why am I going through this? And woe is me, to literally worship. It was regardless of whatever I was going through, he's the same God.
Wow.
He hadn't lost any power. He was deserving of my praise and my worship. And when I shifted to that place,
wow,
then he shifted me. He shifted. My circumstances stayed the same, but almost like you worship your way out of it or through it, or it just doesn't matter. Like, because you're in such a place with God. I'm telling you, that relationship you're talking about, was he close? Was he near? Absolutely. Probably closer than any other time in my
your
life.
Okay.
Any other time in my life. If it had not been, and no one can get the glory, and no one can get the
He's
credit.
not going to let anyone
I was
get it.
in a deep, horrible pit. You know, you think out of the miry clay, you think salvation. No, I was no.
Because you had been saved. You were saved.
Absolutely. I had been saved. And I'm telling you, everything that I ever knew about God, thought about God, felt about God was challenged. And it was like, God, are you real?
Yeah,
Everything I
yeah.
thought I believed, that I knew about, are you real? You know, but God let me know, we talk about Christ likeness, and we want to be like Christ with the miracles and the wonders, but there was a Christ that was acquainted with grief.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
A man of sorrow and acquainted with grief.
Yes.
There was a Christ that cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?
Yeah.
So in our experience, in our journey, we experienced that Christ as well.
Yes.
And that's some of what I was going through. But I think about the songs that I came out better, stronger, wiser.
Yeah.
In so many areas, financially, made much better. You're talking about a good steward. You learn how to manage money when you don't have any.
Yes. But it's so true, because I know when my husband battled cancer for that year, it was a relationship with God that kept me. Because in the same time, we had to get out of our house. We had to move into an apartment.
Yes.
We were seeing medical bills pile up by the hundreds and the thousands of dollars just keep coming in. Then he had to go to rehab, and then he had to have a nurse at home. And I just saw all of the things that were involved. And you really, if God don't really hold you together, you can literally fall apart. And then I was still pastoring at the church, and I had to make sure the church was okay. And then I spent all my days at the hospital. I just think of all of that time that we go through. And those are some of the hardest storms in our life. And so when the pandemic hit, this was just another storm.
Yes.
It was you've been through too much. This was like, we going to be all right. It's just
and
like.
You know what I said? I said some storms you can speak to.
Yeah.
Some of them you're going to go through. Period. Some of them you're going to ride through. And some of them you're coming out on broken pieces. I made it over.
Oh,
there was a
and
whole lot of brokenness.
Pieces.
Broken pieces.
Wow. That's interesting. Let's talk about joyful release. I want to, she likes that part. We're going to talk about joyful release. That the excitement when you get to a place, it's almost like being under an open heaven. That you get to a place in life where it seems as though God just cracks the sky. You see the rainbow, you see the beauty of God, and you realize, I can breathe again. I kind of feel that when I talk about the joyful release, that you got to a place where you literally can breathe again. Anybody out there, right? Come on, send us up some hearts notes. Anybody out there feel a joyful release in your life? Can you think of that time when God bring you through, or maybe you're waiting for a joyful release? Come on, let's talk about what happened there.
So on the joyful release, it was coming through it all, picking up the pieces. You're talking about after the storm. After the storm, I had debt piled up like I don't know what. I had to climb out of debt, credit card debt. So I went to a place, my credit score was, I don't know, 500, 600, wherever. The joyful release is like over 800.
Yes.
But paying off, living a debt-free life. I've lived debt-free for years since that time. To me, that's a joyful release.
Yes.
My family thinks I'm rich. I'll claim it, confess it. But the bottom line is, I can do what I want to do when I get ready to do it.
Because of good stewardship.
Yes. And that to me is a joyful release. If you say, let's go to Australia next week.
Be ready.
I can go to Australia next week.
I can go with you.
I don't have to think about it like, oh, well, you know, how. That to me is a blessing.
And we did that for quite a few years. We were back and forth to Africa. We were going to England. We had been all over the countries. We were going. We did Africa a couple of years together.
Yes.
So it is. So that's when you start breathing again. You can decide this morning, I want to go to Paris tonight if I want to do something. But it didn't happen overnight. And I want you to hear that now on Facebook, on our platforms tonight. It didn't happen overnight. She made a decision. We've been talking about that. Yes. Choices have consequences, and it's the process. Because when I met Marquita at that time, she's going through the process. But once she came out of that process, and she's one of the people. If I'm doing a project, I can call I have about 4 daughters, 4 friends. That if I'm working on any project, I can say, "Listen, man, I'm working on a project. Can you help me with it?" And I can promise you, she's going to send me a check. She's going to Cash App me, PayPal me. She's one of those people that whenever I'm working, because she knows I'm not going to do nothing that God doesn't tell me to do. And whenever I'm working on a project, one of the things about that joyful release, she's one of those people in my life that will say, "Listen, Pastor, I've got you. Check's on the way." Sometimes, I remember one year I remember this. Let me tell you what happened. Bishop Pugh came a couple years ago and he preached for us. And I was getting ready to go to Africa and I didn't have any money. My money was really, really tight. And I was getting ready to go to Africa, and Bishop Pugh said in the service, in 24 hours, somebody is going to get a breakthrough. Somebody is going to get a breakthrough. Well, the next day, Marquita was getting ready to come to Pittsburgh. I don't know if she even told me she was coming, but she showed up in the prophetic service and wrote a check. I think it was $1,000 she wrote a check for. And I didn't look at it. She just put it in my hand and she went on about her business. So when later on in the day, I looked in my look and I said, wait a minute. Is that made out to me? It sure was. And I said, God, but the prophetic word wasn't even mine. He was giving it to someone else in the service. And he was saying that it was for them. But she had come in for the prophetic weekend. And so he said 24 hours, and I said, God, I'm not telling anybody how much I have and what I'm needing to go. And right that next Saturday morning when she came into the service, she walked up, put a check in my hand, and dropped it in my purse because service was starting. And when I got home that day, there was my money. I think we were all leaving together, but I don't know if God had laid it on her heart or what it was, because she needed money to travel too. But I just realized, God, you don't have to let the prophetic word be designated. You just got to be ready to receive it. Yes. And that was one weekend I learned something from God about the prophetic. Stop waiting for them to say, Connie, it's your word. If you put the word out there, I'm going to grab it and pull it in. And that was one of the things that I saw. But think about how many years you couldn't do that.
Oh my gosh, yes. I think about, I think I recalled it, counted it in the book. I had $3. All I had on me was $3. I went to church. I'm like, never stop going to church. Never stop serving God. Talking about sowing in tears. You know, and I just gave the $3. What good is it going to do? But before I left, someone at the back door, don't leave until I see you. And they put $50 in my hand. So God taught me handfuls, like a handful on purpose.
He dropped those
a little and a little there. And it wasn't about communicating the need to anyone, but talking to him.
That's
I always say,
That's
you talk to him, he'll talk to somebody
on your behalf. Absolutely.
Yes.
Say that again.
If you talk to him about your need, he will talk to someone else. You talk to him, do what he told you to do, and he'll speak to someone else. And to me, that's such a blessing. And I remember there would be times when literally the Lord would speak to me to give you a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
When Pastor Neville was sick.
Yes.
I recall that.
Yes.
This is clear. And the whole thing of all the testing is, it's all about obedience.
Yes.
And God has to be able to trust you. If he can trust you with it, if he can get it through you,
he'll give it to you.
He'll get it to you.
Yes.
All you have to do
is trust him.
Is trust him. And when you hear it, release it quick to release it.
Don't try to hold on and figure it out and fleece him. No, 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 no,
Quick
no,
to
no, no.
release.
But you know, that season when Pastor Neville was sick, that I can remember as we're talking about life, we were in the middle of the storm, and I said, God, how do I tithe with all these medical bills? And we had put our house up for sale. The person reneged on the contract, so now I had a mortgage, an apartment to pay, and then his medical bills and parking at the hospital every day. I mean, it was just intense. And so I remember saying to God, God, I can't tithe and do all this. He said, you can't afford not to. He said, but if you tithe what you want me to give you every month, I'll make sure you have it. And I tithe what I normally would tithe. And every month, God sent someone with the money. Marquita was one. My sister Bridget and John was another. Mom Porter. People would literally show up at my house with $1,000 every month to make sure that all the bills were paid. God showed me that if you do it my way, I'm going to take care of you. Because he knew there's nothing I could do. I was at the hospital. I was still pastoring. I couldn't go take another job. But he made sure. That's when you talk about joyful release. He makes sure that the needs that you have, he takes care of them for you. So what's next for Marquita? What's next for you?
Well, next for me is this year I'm writing another book. I've started it. My intent is to finish the book. And it's on widows. It's about widowhood. Actually, it's the widow's might. M-I-G-H-T.
Wow, wow, wow.
Not might, M-I-T-E, but the widow, the strength of the widow. So I'm going to write that. I believe when I was writing this book, the words, the widow was neglected. There's such a compassion that in my heart now that for widows that I didn't have before, because I didn't understand that experience. So I want to write that book. I have another book I've started I want to finish. I'm in the process of moving back to Pennsylvania.
Oh,
moving back to
yes.
Pittsburgh, so I'm excited about that.
Okay.
Closing a chapter in Strongsville, Ohio.
Because you went through all that in another town by yourself.
Out from among my kindred. I was alone. I didn't have family there. But I had to be. God said, out from among your kindred. My family would have never allowed me to go through what I went through if I was here. Yeah. They would have been there and been crutches. So that was important. Okay. And two things. Being there, I said, Lord, Manasseh, he makes me to forget.
Yes.
And Ephraim, I could not leave until I was blessed in the land of my affliction.
Okay.
I was fruitful in the land, so I'm fruitful in the land that I was afflicted. So I'm free to leave now.
Now, time to come. So we're looking to you coming back to Pittsburgh.
I'm excited about, I'm excited.
Well, I've heard you've got many prophetic words for that now.
I have plenty of words.
For you, it's time to come back to Pittsburgh.
Absolutely.
So what about ministry? What are you going to do?
Ministry, I'm looking forward, so I'm retiring. Yeah. So I'll be free to minister, do some consulting. I want to do teaching. Okay. I mean, I love to teach. You know, I love to teach I say I'm a teacher by credentials, profession, calling. Okay. Just all of that. So looking forward to it. I attend my brother's church. Okay. So I've been, most of the time I'm here on weekends anyway. Okay. So I'm a member of Kingdom Come Ministries. Amen. So I minister there and an elder.
I hope you all enjoy Reverend Marquita Batchelor tonight. I'm going to sum up all of that what's just happened, and we thank God for having her on our broadcast tonight. Listen, you can get her book, Tearful Surrender. Come on, you can get
Tearful Surrender, Joyful Release.
Come on, you can get that. You can get that book. You can call that number that's posted, and you can get that book right here. She's in the city of Pittsburgh. You can get that. She can get that book right over to you. And you don't have to even go to Amazon and get it. We can get that book to you. But it's a book worth reading, because everybody that thinks that, people have it easy, we don't. Whenever you have a call on your life, there's no easy call. You've got to realize that God has built us all for the road ahead. God has built us to go through things. Life is going to come at you fast, but you have got to remember that God is the one that's faithful, and he's going to do what he promised you. And she's been such a great, just a friend in my life, just a sister. So I don't talk to her every day, but I surely know if I'm traveling somewhere, if I'm going, she's just right there. And I thank God for that. Those are the people that come into your life and are a blessing to you. But I want to remind you, listen, as we've come out of this time, as we've come out of this, it's time for us to quit some things. I was talking about that this morning. I'm going to drop a few of them in your ears, and then we're going to just wrap up tonight. But coming out of the fast, make a decision to quit some things and begin some new things. Make a new habit. It's like she said, she's living in a joyful place, a joyful release now. Her finances are good now. But she had to go through the process. She had to go through all of that to get there. Don't you go through all of this and this year still have no savings, still have no finance, still struggle is supposed to be a season, not a lifetime. God never called you to live in a lifetime of struggle. It's a season that you are supposed to live in, but not a lifetime. So I just want to let you know tonight, just as you saw her journey, you saw what she has gone through, you can do it. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what your test is. Maybe it's a job loss. Maybe it's your business. Maybe it's just making some new decisions. You're going to buy a home. You're going to do some things this year. Whatever you're deciding to do, just remember, it's a process and you can do it. If you don't quit, you will finish strong. Stop procrastinating and start doing something different. When you let go something, put something in its place. If you're going to let go spending, what are you going to put in its place? Read. Spend time reading. Spend time writing. Fill those voids with something that is wholesome, that's going to produce good fruit. And so one of the things I wrote down today that I just want to share with you, make a new habit. Make a new habit. In this we have about 5-6 more days in this month. I think Sunday's our last day. Make a new habit. Come out of January with a new habit. Something you're going to do different than you haven't done before. Make a decision. Make a new friend. Every year, add 2 new friends to your list. Every year, add 2 new people to your list. Why are you doing that? And I'm not saying make them your buddy, but if everybody in your circle thinks the same, walks the same, after a while, that becomes just monotonous. There's nothing happening. It's like a Dead Sea. Nothing going out and nothing coming in. You need fresh water. You need fresh ideas. Someone that will challenge you. Someone that will say, come on, you can do this. You're going to do it. Who's in your life that's going to push you into your next season? It is so critical to have people in your life that say, listen, hey, Marquita, we said we're going to Australia. We're going to do this. We're going to go to Australia. We need this pandemic to help and go somewhere because we're missing our travels. But just those kind of people that say, I'll go with you. I'm ready to go with you. You need that kind of friend. And you need the kind of friend, too, that will say, you know what, if you can't afford it, let me help you. Let me help you. You do your part and I'll help you. God's going to send those people into your lives. But you got to be willing to change your circle. Be willing to let go of the old so God can establish the new. And remember what she told us tonight in Job. I think that's so funny. Job 42:16. I'm going to preach a message on that. I told her. After this, Job lived. After what? All those sequential testings that he went through, and then all of the friends that tried to tell him something he must have done to let God do this to you. But he got to a place, when he got to Job chapter 42, he said, I no longer hear, no, I can see for myself this relationship with God. And he picked up his life, and the Bible said God restored him better. And that's what I'm looking for.
Absolutely. I
am looking in this year for a restoration that's amazing. Everything I lost, every house I did, any finance I lost, I want God to restore it all back to me. How about you out there? What do you want us to pray for? You want a power of restoration, and that's what I'm praying for. We're not coming out of January empty-handed. We're coming out built up, restored, energized, thanking God for all of his blessings. We're praying blessings upon Marquita, that we're going to hear more about her new book. And listen, you know that I'm never stopped. I always got something going on. So you get ready, because we're just beginning. I want to thank our team for working with us. Listen, we're going to be hitting those platforms in February. And then in February, get your friends. Those of you that are going to be talking about your marriage, Pastor Neville and I are going to be here the first Tuesday in February to tell you how we met and how we got on each other's nerves. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be good. I tell you, it's going to be real good. And then don't let Kathy laugh. Her and Reggie's going to be coming. We're going to get them right on out here, because they're the more of the newlyweds. You know, we've been in this thing 22 years. And then we're going to have some singles come and talk to you about living a single life that's productive and healthy and enjoying being single. So you don't want to miss the month of February at all. You want to make sure that you're here with us to see that broadcast, because I'm finding a lot of relationships in the church is falling apart. And I think it's because we have become so church, we forgot that we can have fun and we can laugh and spend time with each other. I told my husband that when we get married, I'm not going to be in church 24/7. I like the beach. I'm a beach girl. And one time he took me to see Shakespeare Country. I said, this ain't no beach. Let's go home. Time to hit. I'm not a history buff. Let's get out of here and get to a beach. I am the beach girl. I was born in the islands, and when you talk about vacation, that's it. I'm not going to look at no castles. I'll take a picture, keep moving, but this is not a vacation for me. So I want you to know something. Marriage is to be fun. Marriage is going to be tested, but you should not be in a marriage sad all the time, down, broke, discontent. That is not it. If your marriage is not fun, if you can't enjoy your marriage, something is wrong with that. And we're going to talk about that. And he's going to tell you how he lives with a Connie Brooks. He's going to tell you it's not an easy thing, because I'm always on the next project. I'm always doing something. And I love what I do. And one thing about being married to him, he never stops me. He always releases me to go and do what I do, and I thank God for that. So thank you so much for joining us tonight right here on Live Talk. Our producer is Kathy Matthews. She's the one that pulls all of this together for us, and thank you to our team. Monica, thank you so much for being on tonight. Thank you, Najina. Thank you, Virginia. That's our team that makes this possible. So thank you for being on Let's Talk Live. God bless you.